Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. If you'll give me a minute to set up here. Oh, and please excuse my hair. I have a deep conditioner on it. Okay, so I'm going to bring up my tablet here so I can see you guys' questions if you have any. And of course, that's my ocean playing in the background, keeping me calm and relaxed. There we are. So thank you to my replay viewers. Thank you so much for coming in. Thank you to my web viewers. Thank you to our catch viewers. We hope to... Hello, Garth. Thank you so much for coming in. I appreciate the support. Hi, Ruth. Oh, that makes me feel good. Thank you guys so much for coming in for the support. I'm surely going to need it. Thank you. And so I have my tablet up finally. So I can see your comments. So forgive me if you see the top of my head throughout the course of this broadcast. Hi, Diva K. Thank you so much for joining. So I haven't seen you for a while. Well, now I rest on Sundays, and I don't scope on Mondays. So it's I haven't been doing a landing page, Garth, where I do the landing scope where people, when they come on, they don't see just an empty page, but I have so much going on. I'm actually in a training. I'm in the middle of house repairs, and we're trying to get ready for travel, and it's just very busy. Not to mention Hamaji keeps me busy as well. I love my caregivers, and we have been quite close as we lead up to the holidays. I've noticed an increase in caregiver crisis. So praise God for being able to be of assistance. But that kind of explains where we have been and where I've been. So tonight we are discussing, and please forgive me, because this topic is, as I mentioned, across self-care first. Yes, Ruth, self-care first. And you know, my husband is my accountability partner when it comes to self-care. He will shut it down. And so, yeah, he put his foot down and he said, no more working on Sundays. So I was able to negotiate with him to get at least 4 hours in if I need to catch up or work on some content. So again, if you're just joining, excuse my appearance up here. I have a deep conditioner going. And so, yes, great job, baby. He's in the kitchen washing dishes for me, so he's not on right now. I just love him. Okay, so if you were just joining, we're Hamaji, a nonprofit organization out of Houston, Texas. We are the Family Caregivers caregiver. We support mental health family caregivers who are supporting their loved ones on their journey to mental health or on their journey to finding mental health. And if you don't know what a caregiver is, a family caregiver is, it's a family member or a friend who cares for someone with a long-term illness. And you guys let me know if that ocean sound in the background is kind of interfering with your being able to hear me. Let me know and I'll turn it down a little bit. It just keeps me calm. And so it's a family member or a friend who cares for a family member or a friend with a long-term illness. In our case, it's mental health, Hamaji Healing Families. Thank you so much, Ruth. In our case, it's family members with mental health conditions or mental illness. I like to say mental health conditions because a lot of people attach a stigma to mental illness and they automatically shut down when you're talking to them. And so they're not able to receive the knowledge and information that helps them to make, thank you so much, Ruth, helps them to make, make them receptive to hearing what a mental health condition is, or what someone battling a mental health condition such as bipolar disorder, as in terms of myself, who I am a depression and anxiety survivor. Those are the things we like to talk to people about. And sometimes when you say mental illness, people shut down because they automatically go into fear mode because it's something they don't understand. So kind of give you a background on who we are and what we do. Right now, for the month of December, we decided that we wanted to raise awareness for families and those who may feel like they are coming upon the holidays, and it's difficult, because you're going to be meeting with family. Thanksgiving has come and passed. Yes, the stigma causes fear. Thank you so much, Ruth. Stigma causes fear because people don't understand that mental illness is, in fact, a true health issue. It's a actually physical condition. It's actually a real illness. They have brain scans that prove that people are suffering from things such as bipolar disorder. Schizophrenia. I don't know if there's one for bipolar disorder. I know there's one for schizophrenia that can be read on the brain scan, and I know that depression can be read from a brain scan. And I was talking to another young lady. I was in her scope, I think it was last night. And now that I say that, I need to write down because I forgot to send that article to her. But there was an article I read over the summer where, it's an article. Let me put that on my wall. An article that I read over the summer that there is a blood test they can do now that has certain markers in it for schizophrenia. So that kind of gives you an idea about the stigma of mental illness. And so we decided that we wanted to do a series that would cause, I know, what a breakthrough, right, Ruth? We wanted to share with other families, not just our own experiences in having dysfunctional families, because my husband and I both happen to come from families that have generational curses that have continued through the generations. But we share also information and experiences that our family caregivers have shared with us. Let me turn that down so that doesn't get in you guys' ear. That other family caregivers have shared with us, survivors have shared with us, and we share those so that people understand, number one, that you're not alone. Because that's one of the major, how can I put it? To me, it's a major component in having people understand mental health awareness and not be afraid of getting help. That's number one. Number two, in the instance of Hamaji Healing Families, it helps people to see that they're not the only one with, problems in their families. I mean, you may come across people who have pretty functional, highly functional families. And I always say, I don't believe that there's such a thing. I just believe that some families are just they're more equipped to handle crises and challenges and disagreements. Okay, so we'll say that. Some families are just better equipped to handle those things, and they're able to iron them out before they turn into this big ugly thing, right? So, you have to understand that there's no such thing as a perfect family. Every family has their troubles. Some of us have more troubles than others. And so we wanted to share that with people as we are going into the holidays, and as this week is the Christmas week. And we wanted to give, some information leading up to the holidays to kind of ease the transition into going into the holidays, and possibly, mend some families, possibly cause some families to reconsider, maybe we can work on this. Maybe there is hope for us, to cause people to think that maybe I can repair the relationship with myself and my parents, or myself and my siblings, right? And so by sharing, my experiences, I won't share my husband's experiences. That's not fair to him, because I want him to be able to do that on his own time. And plus, he's very much more private than I am. So I'm comfortable sharing my experiences because I think it's only fair, right? It is possible. Yes, it is, Ruth. It is possible. Excuse me. And so what we're doing now this week is we've covered in week one mental health and marriage. And we discussed in week one. And you can find our scopes for that on catch.me/Hamaji1. Okay? And you can go over to Catch and you can catch up on them. And they'll be the title will have HHF16 in it. That's how you'll know which ones they are. And so the first week we covered mental health and marriage. The second week we covered mental health and adult parents with adult children. And thank you so much, Ruth. I appreciate you. Thank you. And then the third week we covered adult children and parents. That was the third week. And this week we are covering something that is, as I can say, my thorn in my side. And I talked to a friend of mine, and I was telling her, I said, during this transition of me raising awareness for mental health, I've learned so much. I've been able to help so many people. But the biggest thing and the biggest reward I can say I've gotten out of this is a lot of personal growth, a lot of self-growth, a lot of growth in empathy, a lot of growth in understanding, a lot of growth in patience. And for me, as I mentioned on all of my social media sites, that I've been having a challenge in trying to reconcile with my siblings. And it's a long story behind that. It's not enough time to go into it, but I'm going to give you a general gist of it tonight. And I'll be covering it as we go into the new year, because my goal is to be as effective as I can. And as I cover this information with you, you'll understand why I'm so passionate about it. What was I saying? Okay, and so okay, and so this week I'm covering mental health and adult sibling rivalry. Why are we still fighting? So I'm going to start with the story. I would like you guys to kind of understand where I'm coming from. I happen to be one of 3 children my mother had. My parents married when they were very young. My father was military. My mother was a housewife, and we lived on the base. And so fast forward to my little sister being born, and my parents later on were divorced because my father had difficulty with only maintaining a marriage. And I'm putting that in the most tactful way I can. He had outside relationships, which resulted in children as well. And so my parents wound up divorcing. My mom became a single mom. And so she raised us. She bought her first home. She worked her butt off. And she gave us lots of love, lots of attention. But as I mentioned in, I think it was a scope I talked in last week, my family has suffered under the weight of a generational curse of where there have been challenges between the mothers and their children having a bond. And so my great-grandmother, who moved the family to California from Memphis, Tennessee, did not have the best relationship with my grandmother. They were very stern, very strict, but there was no attachment there. It was more mechanical. And so that carried over into the relationship for my grandmother and her children, which was only, I think, 2 she had favorites, okay? And that's what we're talking about tonight and why it's so important to have this discussion. She had 2 favorite children, and my mother was not one of them. I say that in lightness, but it was not the best situation. And so I watched my mother struggle for approval from my grandmother. And when it came down to it, she was the only child that was ever there for her when it came down to my grandmother needing someone to see to her, get to her doctor's appointments. And my grandmother had difficulty understanding things that she read sometimes. So she'd call my mom over to take care of those things. So my mom was her caregiver fairly early. I can remember as far back, my mom was in her 20s when she bought our house. And so that kind of gives you an idea of this, kind of trying to set a foundation for you of what that generational foundation is. And so as we were children, I favored my father a great deal. And so there was a lot of tension I learned later on as an adult. And you'll have to forgive me because this is a very difficult topic for me. And I've been preparing for it all day that I don't get emotional and I can be able to share the information with you. And so my mom, being a single mom, decided, well, not just being a single mom, my mom decided that she was going to change the way that she interacted with her children. And she did. She was much more loving. She was much more affectionate. My mother provided for us. We never wanted for anything. We had the best clothes. We had the best home. Our house was impeccably decorated. Yard well manicured. We drove the best cars. We ate at the finest restaurants. We traveled, okay? So that was my mother as a single parent working her butt off to provide that for her children. At the same time, my mom struggled still with her generational foundation that she had, and that is she had favorites. And so she took it upon herself to, because I was always much more mature as a child, I could handle responsibility more. A great deal of responsibility was placed on me. As we were latchkey children, I became responsible for the caring for my younger sister at the time, cooking, cleaning, and letting ourselves in from school. And so that happened at around, I would say about 7 or 8. And so a lot of that also became difficult because my mother, once it was difficult to have my younger sister, she wasn't able to go to school full time. So she took her to work with her as she worked for the school district. And so I was left to let myself in, or either I would wait for a babysitter to come and get me. And so early on, I understood that there was a difference being made, but I still desired the love of my mother. And as a child, you don't know anything different. And so as time progressed, and as I mentioned last week, my mom was a perfectionist. When I say perfectionist, my mother took the trash out in heels. Her hair was always impeccable. I mean, she wore the finest clothes. We shopped at Orbax and Robinson's May, and that's how I grew up with her. Everything had to be just so. And I understand now why. At the time, it wasn't a big deal. It was just what I knew. And so as time progressed and responsibilities became greater, I started to feel the pressure as the oldest, because I was now responsible even more so for my sister, who at many times it was very challenging because, you have the youngest has ways of being sneaky and doing things and then not taking ownership for it. And so my mom was of the belief system, which I was later guilty of using myself, that if I don't know who's telling the truth, then I'll just get both of you, and I'll be sure to get the one who did whatever. So that kind of gives you an idea of where we were in terms of the parental structure and setup. My father, on the other hand, was not in the picture again until I was 5 years old. And I can remember meeting him at his grandmother's house, my great-grandmother. Hi, honey. Thank you for coming in. Nana. I remember meeting him there and seeing him for the first time again. And I remember, conversations we had, and that'll be something for another scope, because I can set up as to how that had an impact on my life as well. And so he favored me. And so when we went to visit him, I was allowed to sleep in bed with him, and I was allowed to, spend the most time with him. And I can recall he would spank my sister more, and he said it was because she cried all the time. And so it kind of started to build up a tension between the children. Whereas, okay, well, they like you better, and they like you better. And it starts that whole painful thing that happens between children. And so fast forward to I've shared that I'm a survivor of childhood abuse, sexual abuse. And so that came up. And as I revealed that and started to speak openly about it, I was thought to be the only one. And I carried that with me as my family, because the abuser denied it for so long. My family thought I was a problem kid, which led to a lot of discord in my life. And I started running away from home at 15, trying to escape the abuse. And I was under the impression that I was the only one. And fast forward. I'm fast forwarding because I'm just trying to give you a setup of where the conflict comes in, and where there's a foundation for each family that this happens. Favoritism and a child feeling unloved or neglected happens, and basically it starts a competition between the children. it starts resentment between the children and the parents. And I say this often, when you know better, you do better. And since the parents don't have a good structure, they don't have a generational foundation laid down. They many times, and as many of us, we decide, well, when I have my children, I'm going to do things differently. And that is the intent. And you go through life and you do some things differently, but you also carry over. If you don't address those things that have caused pain generations behind you, if you don't address those things, they carry over into the next generation and the next, and it continues until it has been addressed. And so later on, finding out that I was not the only one and that I had been allowed to be ostracized by the family, called horrible things, accused of wanting to be molested, and all of those things, it built up in me a resentment for my sister, because I felt that she could have spoke up for me. And so that carried over into our adult life, but I was always her protector. And so guilt came about as a result as well, that how did I not know? And I should have taken her with me when I left. And with that came me trying to compensate as an adult by standing in the gap and trying to be the second mother for my sister. So we go through our early stages of adulthood. I take on the role and ownership of my nephew and niece, standing in the gap for her. Some traumatic things happened in her life where the children's father was murdered, and so she was left to take care of her children on her lonesome, and was pregnant with my niece. And so I filled in the gap and, stood in the gap and was there for her, and we supported one another as I was going through my own thing of trying to finally be divorced from my abusive mate. And so there was a lot of things going on. And so as time went on, I started to realize that this reciprocation that came in the form, and this is very important, that's why I'm really wanting to share this. Reciprocation that I was looking for was, in turn, for her to help me with my children when I was ready to go to school, as I'd help for her and watch the kids for 3 months while she went away to a college program and be able to invest in herself. And I was looking for that, but her form of reciprocation came in the form of money or gifts. And she didn't have the ability to reciprocate in like kind. And so I was resentful of her for that. And so that carried over into our adult lives, where there's this constant conflict. And we introduce our siblings from my father's second marriage and from his other relationships. And now we have chaos. And so you have children. My father passed away when I was 15 from suicide. The family wants to say that it's not that he accidentally overdosed, but my father was a paramedic. He knew exactly what he was doing. And so now the children are left without guidance, because our mothers cannot come together and, be a sense of guidance and leadership for us, because there's so much pain and resentment there. So there's no leadership there in terms of parents. Okay, so you have a lot of wounded people, emotionally wounded people, trying to come together and have a relationship. And I won't say that's virtually impossible. It's impossible. So getting together was a lot of competition, was a lot of clicking off into cliques, and I'd go and try and get us all together in one spot, in one place, and then we find out we have another sibling, and then it just becomes, now there's another baby well, she's not a baby, she's in her 30s, but another sibling comes into the picture, and there's still this clicking up with, oh, well, I'm going to align myself with this person and that person, and all in all, as the oldest, I had the most time with my father and the most time with my aunts and both sides. And it becomes a resentment thing there, where things that we have no control over, none of us as children, now complicate our lives even more so. and get in the way of us having a relationship. So there's so much pain, so much resentment, so much mistrust that we have tried to have a relationship, but because we were going about it the wrong way, we're not successful. And so when I say that this course over the period of time where I have had to learn to live with and manage a mental health condition, learn to understand how mental health impacts a family and family members, learn why people behave in the ways that they do, learning how to be compassionate and understanding and not judgmental. Okay. And so with that being said, I last year, was it last year? Yeah, it was last year. My mother called out for help. She's actually a caregiver for now my youngest sister, who is the result of my mom's second marriage to my stepdad. And she called, and she's the caregiver for my two nephews that my sister has left in her custody. My sister, who's 30, almost 30, excuse me. And so she says, well, I'm having surgery. Now, my mom is in California. I live in Houston, Texas, which means in order for me to go with her to see her, I would have to make a trip. So I said, okay, well, let me know when. We go through the details, and I arranged to make the trip. We make the trip down only to find out that it's not a surgery, it's exploratory. And I called my sister prior to and said, well, do you know that mom's having this surgery? And she says, well, it's not as big as she's making it. I don't have time. I can't take off work. And I just really don't. And there's some other conflict there between my mom and sister as far as my baby sister. That's a whole other thing, too. And so anyway, I make the trip down and see my mom and what have you. And I actually see my sister, both my sisters, and we have breakfast together. And I'm like, this is awesome. You know, I had made a declaration 2 years ago that I was going to heal my family. And I spoke that openly and outwardly on my social media sites because I had already been very open about the struggles we had as a family and how I wanted to break generational curses so that our children can stop living this way. And so to have so many things that happened leading up to this day, and we were still able to meet, I was very excited about that. Excuse me. So to come home and to want to continue that relationship with my sister, I was excited about it because I told my husband on our drive home. Thank you, Ruth. I told my husband about it on our drive home, and I said, maybe this is a step in the right direction. You know, maybe we'll all finally have an opportunity to stop this, you know, this pain that just continues on. And so I know she didn't visit my mom the whole time that I was there. My baby sister, who has been diagnosed with a mental health condition and was battling cervical cancer at the time, there were some harsh words exchanged between my mom and the sister right under me that really hurt me, that my mom said she told her. And so I addressed them with her, and she expressed her ill feelings towards my younger sister of not taking responsibility for her obligation with my nephews. and we had a discussion about my mom, who has a tendency to blow things up, and that's a topic for another scope. But my mom has some challenges there. And so when I knew that she hadn't come over, and we'd driven down, and it was a grueling turnaround trip in which I was caring for both my mom and my younger sister, who was going through chemotherapy, and then I had to leave them and to come home, knowing that she didn't have anybody there to take care of her. And so and getting home, and my mom tells me my grandmother has a stroke and goes into the hospital just newly after coming home. And so, there was lots going on, and my mom was needing assistance, and my sister wouldn't be there for her. She told her she was too busy. And so as I'm supporting my mother over the phone from a distance and going through the motions with caregiving and talking to doctors and making sure my grandmother is receiving the best care and trying to do all this from afar, and we are dealing with trying to keep our son stabilized, and I have my oldest son who had since come home and was facing challenges within his marriage that we were trying to save. And so there was so much the enemy was throwing at us, that was just, I was watching everything that I'd worked so hard for being just picked apart, okay? And so I call my mom to check on her, and she doesn't answer, which she does often. She'll pick and choose when she wants to be bothered. Sometimes for 3 weeks I won't hear from her, or if she calls me and I say that I'm really busy, can I call you right back? She won't answer the phone when I call her back, and it'll be sometimes 3 weeks or a month before she'll take my call. I can leave voicemail, but that's that whole thing. So I see my sister, who hasn't had a chance to go to take care of my mom. She's posting how many parties she's going to on her social media pages. And I say, well, that's cruel. My mom needs so much help right now, and my grandma's in the hospital, and she has the ability to be there. And so when I called my mother that day and she didn't answer, I said, and she didn't answer. And I see my sister, who posts a picture of my mom and her online. And I call immediately after, and she still doesn't answer. And I said, okay, that's painful. That's hurtful. And the child in me felt so rejected, so sad, so angry about how often this has happened, that I've been the only child to be there to take care of my mom and to do things for her, and to be rejected at again another turn. I shut down completely. I stopped calling. I didn't answer any calls, anything. I shut down. And so I get a call from my son in August, and he's hysterical and upset. And he says, why didn't you tell me that grandma passed away? And I told him because I didn't know. My grandma passed away. And my cousin calls after seeing my son and says, why weren't you guys at the funeral? And I said, I didn't even know she passed away. My mom and sister didn't think it was important for us to know, so they didn't tell any of us. And so I missed her funeral. And that was very difficult. So it caused even more anger, more resentment. And I decided I was never going to talk to them again. I was not going to do this anymore. It wasn't worth it. And I told God, I said, maybe this is meant to be. Maybe you're trying to show me that they're not supposed to be in my life. And I kept praying. And I kept praying about it. And I hurt so bad. I was so afraid I was going to have a relapse.